Welcome to Remote Backup Services, Remote Backup Systems webinar for today. Today we're going to discuss all of the plugins and utilities that go with the RBS server. That's the online installer plugin, the registration wizard, the email notifications, and the EXE installers. Gautam Tiruvanallur is going to lead the presentation today, and I'm his sad and pathetic sidekick, the CEO and founder, Rob Cosgrove. At the end of the presentation, we're going to answer some questions, and in fact, throughout the presentation, we'll also answer questions, so type those into your user console. We will probably not be able to get to all of them during the seminar today. If you don't get your question answered, then please email it to sales@remote-backup.com, and we'll answer it by email. Please stay tuned to our website at remote-backup.com as we announce more live seminars. And now I'll turn it over to Gautam.
Hello everyone. I've already installed the plugins, so I'm just going to start with the registration wizard. The first thing that you do after installing the registration wizard is restart your RBS server. Now, after the registration wizard is installed, the very first thing that you do is go to Tools and Properties on the RBS Manager. Select Manager Preferences, and there is an option called RBS Registrar. You need to select this option, and you can change the username and password, or you can leave it as defaults. The RBS Registrar login is used by the Registration Wizard plugin to log into the RBS server whenever a client selects new registration and registers to the RBS server. You can leave it as default, or you can change it, but once you set it, I don't think you would have to change it at any point in the future. But make sure that you have this enabled in the Properties Manager Preferences tab. Once you do that, click on Apply and say OK. And the next thing that you do is go to Tools and click on Customize Client Installer. This is the Customize Client Installer tool, and the only thing that you need to change here would be to enter the RBS server's IP address. For now, I'm going to give it the loopback address of 127.0.0.1 because we are testing it on the same machine. But you would need to enter the RBS server's public IP address, or the domain name, or the server locator address. Once you select that, you click on Apply and say yes to continue, and say OK to that message box. I've also installed the online installer, so whenever you make any changes to the customized client installer or the registration wizard configuration, it would always ask you to make the changes to the online installer too. I'm going to say yes to make the changes because I would like the settings to remain the same for both the CD-based installer and the online installer. So click on yes to that, and the database and the files have been copied over to the online installer. So that's the first thing that you would do. Click on Close. Now, after you set the IP address in the customized client installer, you need to restart your RBS server once. So let's go ahead and do that. So from the desktop, restart your RBS server, and once it's up, now you're ready to do the actual client wizard configuration, which is the settings for the registration wizard. To get to that, you select Tools and click on Client Wizard Configuration, and that'll bring you to the registration wizard setup tool. By default, it is set as the disable option is turned on. So select Disable Registration Wizard to enable all the options. Now, as you can see on the left-hand panel, there are different options, and each panel has information about what it does. These are the screens that the end user will actually see when he selects new registration. So this will be the introduction panel that will be presented to the end user. You can customize all the text inside this introduction panel. There are 3 paragraphs. This is the default text that you see on the panels, and you can add your own text or customize or remove the text in these panels. Similarly, once you've finished the introduction panel, you can either select the right arrow or you can select the option down on the left-hand corner. And the second panel that the user will actually see is the user information panel, where users, this is the panel where you can display some text to the user to enter the username, address, or the contact information. Once you've done with this panel, you click on Next, which is the login, username, and password. There are different methods of assignment for the username and password. If you select the drop-down box for username, you'll see that there are five different options. If you want the user to enter his own username and password, you can select Entered by User, or you can set it to random, where it automatically assigns a random username and password, or you can set it to sequential, which generates a sequential username with an optional prefix. You can select the prefix and the length in this assignment method, or you can set it to predefined, where you would create a user account for that particular user on the server, but you would have to pass on the username and password along with your installer to the end user. Or you can set it to the email address, where the email address would be the username by default. I'm going to set it to Entered by User, so the username can select his own username and password. Also, the text on this panel can also be customized. Once you've done with this logon, username, password panel, the next is the connection panel. The connection panel, there are a few options here which are read-only, which is you just have to make sure that the RBS server address here is the address of your RBS server, which will be the public IP address or the domain name or the server locator address. Make sure the port number that is shown here is the actual command port of the RBS server. Based on your connection options, by default always on is selected, but if you have clients that use ISP or dial-up, you can select that option appropriately. I'm going to set it to always on. And the next option is the backup options. The backup options, this panel is not visible to the end user, but you can pre-configure some of the settings that will be configured on the client itself. Some of these options are the purge options, where the keep latest files option and the purge files older than option, or the default compression level or encryption method. You can select any of the, you can configure these options like you want it, and then once you're done, you can select the next panel, which will be the panel which will be the last but one panel that the user selects, where he clicks next to register to the server. Again, all the information that is seen in these panels can be customized with your own text. And this is the finish panel, which will be displayed to the end user after the registration is successful. So this will be the last screen that will be displayed to the end user as far as the registration wizard goes. Once you've configured all these panels, click on Save, and then you click on the Test Wizard option. The Test Wizard option allows you to actually see what the end user would actually see when he selects new registration. So this is the first panel that will be visible to the end user. It will always show your customized text that you've configured. So let's click on Next. It is pre-configured with all the test values. Because you're running just a test to make sure that it's displayed properly, you don't have to change any of these values in here. You can click on Next and select the username is the email address. If you click on Next again, now we are ready to click on Next, and it will connect to the registration server via the internet and actually register the particular user on the RBS server. So it says the test is successful. When you see this message, then the registration wizard is configured and it's ready to be. It's ready for you to create your own CDs and distribute the installer to your client. So once the test is successful, this is the last panel. So you click on Finish. So the test wizard is successful. It is. You have to be sure that the test wizard goes through successfully. That'll make sure that everything is set up correctly on your RBS server. So once you're done with the registration wizard process, you can close the panel. That's the only configuration necessary for the registration wizard plugin. Let's see.
So the registration wizard plugin, part of it exists on the server, and that's the part that you just saw, where you can customize it. And the other part is the registration server. Maybe we should look at that section of the RBS manager so we can see how you can turn that on and off. Also, the other part of it exists on the client. So what the registration wizard does is actually modifies the way that the client installs, replaces its default install shield screens with some of these registration wizard screens.
As far as the server is concerned, the only thing that you need to turn on is the RBS registrar. So as long as you turn this RBS registrar on, the registration server is on the server side, and it's ready to accept any registration attempts from the client. So the next plugin is the online installer. The online installer, there is no customization or configuration necessary. The online installer is basically a bunch of files that'll be hosted on your web server. So if you have a website or a web server hosted, I'll show you the files. Okay, so once you install the online installer, you can browse to your application folder, which is C program files RBS server, and in the RBS server folder you'll see a folder called web, and inside that you'll see the online installer. These are the online installer files. These files are the files that you need to move to your web server, or if the web server is hosted on the same machine, all you need to do is point somewhere on your website, you need to create a link to download the installer for the online installer. You need to create a link to the index.html file inside the online installer.
Also, you have to be running a web server on your RBS server for that to work.
Yes, you can use Apache server, or you can use IIS, whichever is. You can. It's up to you. If you already have IIS installed, you can use that. And somewhere in your website, you create a link to point to the index.html file. Then you can actually launch the index.html file, and this is how it looks to the end user. So when they go to your website, and after you present to them a download or an installer link, which will link to the index.html page, this is the page that they will see, and this is the information about the online installer. All they have to do is click on the install button, and it installs the client software on their systems.
And how's this better or different than an exe installer, or is this an exe installer?
This is not an exe installer. The advantage is they don't have to download a 36 MB file on their system and then run the exe from their systems. When you use the online installer, the installer starts. It's an online installer. They don't have to actually download anything. It directly starts the installation through the web itself. So that's the difference between the exe installer versus the online installer.
So one of the ways that we could use this is if you've got a website on another server with a server host someplace, somewhere on that website you can have a link that says install our software or download our software. And
Right.
That link should go back to the RBS server, the web server that runs on the RBS server. You don't have to run both of those sections of the website on the same computer. In fact, we don't recommend that you run your commercial website on your RBS server computer. Hopefully it's going to be far too busy doing backups to service the web.
Also, if your website is hosted on some other server, all you have to do is move the online installer folder to your web server, and then point it to index.html on your website, and that'll install the software.
An even better idea.
So that's actually, there is no configuration necessary for the online installer. But one thing to keep in mind is if you are hosting this on IIS, you'd have to define MIME types. and there is a list of MIME types that are necessary for the online installer to work properly, and it's on our website. If you go to our website and in the go to the search box and type in let's say MIME. Okay, just search for MIME and it'll result in one article. This is the article, and if you scroll down, it tells you how to add MIME types to your IIS. And these are all the MIME type extensions that you need to add to your IIS. It is must in, I think it is a must that you define all the MIME types listed here. But in some cases it might not be required, but if you're using IIS 6.0, I've seen that you have to define these MIME types. If you're using a previous version, it might not be required. But it's on our website, and to get to the MIME types article, you just search for MIME using the search engine. And once you've set the MIME types, you can test from another system, the online installer, and make sure it installs the client properly. That's about it about the online installer. Let's see. The next plugin is the email notifications. The email notifications used to be a separate plugin which was distributed as a separate CD prior to 9.4. But with version 9 and above, it is built into the server software itself. To get to the email notifications, you select Tools and you select Email Notifications. The email notifications can be turned on for different purposes. I mean, there are 4 different kinds of notifications that the server sends out automatically. Like you can see, there is a successful backup notification, which will send out a success notification whenever the backup is complete. So the user or the end user receives an email about the status of the backup and some information about how many files were backed up, how many bytes were backed up, and it also attaches a log file about the backup log itself as a zip file attachment. Then there is a failed backup notification, which gets triggered if the backup was failed for some reason or is incomplete. Then it sends a failed backup notification to the end user. Then there is a missed backup notification that you can configure to run once a day, and it runs during that time that you define, and it sends out an email to all the users who have missed their scheduled backups. So that's the missed backup notification. And then the last one is the over quota notification, which sends out an email to all the users who have busted their quota. So if you have a predefined limit to the users as far as the quota on the server goes, and if a user goes above the quota limit, it automatically sends out an email saying that you have reached your quota, or you've used up more than what is assigned. Let's go over through the settings of the email notification. The first thing that you need to do is make sure that you enter your SMTP server address, which is your mail server address or your outgoing SMTP server address, which in this case, in our case, it's mx.remote-backup.com. And you also need to set the port number for your SMTP server. In most cases, the default port is 25. And if your SMTP server requires authentication, you need to select this checkbox, and you need to enter your username and password that is required for your outgoing mail server. If it doesn't require authentication, then you can leave it unchecked. Once you've set the mail server details, you can click on Save. So it gets saved in the server itself. The next thing that you do is to configure each of these notifications. You can enable or disable any of these notifications individually, and you can also assign the email address or the different subject lines to each of these notifications, and also the template itself. Let's go one by one. To enable the successful notification, you click on the little checkbox beneath the notification to enable it, and now you'll see all the options underneath are not grayed out anymore. The first thing you need to do is select the to address. Who do you want the email to go to? There are 2 predefined options here called user email and account email. The difference between user email and account email is, let's go to the account section on the manager. Now there are, on the left hand side are the account groups, and on the right are the actual user accounts. The user email is the email address defined for each user. So if you right click and say edit user, or you double click on a user account, you'll see an email address field in here. So this is the email address for this user called demo. So if you enable the notifications, if you enable the email address to user email, then that means the actual email address defined under each user, that'll be the email address that'll the notification will be sent to. Now the account email address is for the account group itself. So if you right click and say edit the account group, there is an email address field in here as well. So if you don't want the actual end user to receive the email, but you want just the account group email address to receive the email, you can set it to the account email address.
Now here's an example of how you'd want to use that account email. Suppose you have several clients, and each of your clients has several computers, and there's an administrator at the facility. So you would want to set the house account email address to the administrator instead of to each of the individual users there, because they wouldn't know what to do with it. Further, there's some people have yet another kind of email notification called new user notification, which is not on this version that we're looking at. But new user notifications are used to notify you if when a new user signs up. Can I answer another question?
Yeah.
This goes back to the online installer. Somebody asked if we can customize the online installer like you can the EXE. And the answer is yeah, and it gets done automatically. While you're customizing everything else in the system, it knows if you have an online installer plug-in, and if you do, it'll either edit that stuff without asking you, or it'll ask you if you want to also update the online installer. So there's no extra work that you need to do to edit the online installer while you're customizing your client software. Now,
Okay.
you can also, let's talk about who can get these emails. You can also send this to multiple email addresses. If you type it in there, you can put a semicolon after the email address and enter up to, I don't know, how many email addresses can it send to at once?
There's no limit.
No limit. Okay, so you could enter 4 or 5 email addresses up there.
You can actually, if you don't want the user email to, the end user or the account group email, you can actually type in your own email address separated by semicolons. Or if you want, you can add your address to a CC address in here. If you want to be CC'd on all the notifications that get sent out from the server, or you can add it to the BCC address. And you can add multiple addresses in the CC or the BCC fields as well, separated by semicolons. Make sure that you enter the from address too, that is required. The from address cannot be blank, so make sure you have a valid from address entered in this field too. And then the subject line. The subject line can be anything from. You can have your own subject line. And then there is an option where it says attach logged email. What this does is, if you select this option, the notification, the email that goes out to the end user, it will also attach a log in a zip format, which is the actual backup log for the session that was just finished. So that's an option that you can turn on and off. To edit the actual template, you can click on edit template, and this is the actual template for the successful notifications. As you can see, it's like it's HTML, or you can put in your own HTML tags in here, or you can configure any of the text in this template. The fields that are marked with the hash mark symbols, these cannot be. You can remove it, but you cannot configure the. These are like key fields that the program uses to, replace the actual values. Like for status, it will be replaced by backup successful or backup failed. The username field is replaced by the actual username of the client that is doing a backup. So these are all the fields, the key fields that are replaced by actual values at runtime. You can change any of the text that is apart from the apart from the keywords. So you can add your own company name in here. You can change, and you can also add your own text at the bottom of the, or anywhere in this template. Actually, you can add your own custom text if you want to.
Well, actually, it's an HTML file. So you see the pre tags there. All that does is turn the text into whatever the default text for the browser is. If you get rid of those, then you can write just pure HTML in here. You can put pictures, you can put links, you can do all kinds of stuff. You can make it really pretty, make it look like a newsletter. And any place you put hash marks around one of our keywords, it'll be replaced in your text right there in the HTML as well.
Right. So once you're done with the successful template configuration, you can just save it, and let's click on try. Try is an option to send a test notification. If you want to see if you've done modifications to your template, and if you want to check all your settings are correct for the email notification, you can click on try and enter an email address and click on OK. And if it sends out an email successfully, it shows you at the bottom corner here, it says completed successfully, and you should receive an email based on what you've modified in the template.
One of the things that we'd like to caution you is about attaching the log files to the emails. They are .zip files. Users don't usually need to see those. Sometimes they do, but not usually. And they often get blocked by the mail servers from either your SMTP server or the mail server of the user. So we're suggesting that you not do that unless you have a compelling reason to do so.
The next notification type is the failed backup notification. Again, similarly, you can enable this notification if you want to, and similarly you can select the end user who is going to receive this notification. It could be you or the user email or the administrator of that account group. Again, you just have to make sure that you enter the from address correctly, and if you want to be CC'd or BCC'd, you can include your own address in there and the subject line. And again, you have the option to attach the log, and if you want to edit the template, you can do so, and each notification has its own template file that you can customize. This is similar to the successful notification. Again, similar to the successful notification template, you can customize the failed template as well. And the last two are the missed notifications. If you want to enable that, it sends out this notification is not active all the time. You need to schedule a time to run the missed notifications. The recommendation is to run it at a time when the server is not, when you know that all the clients might have finished the backup. This mostly is in the daytime or whenever your server has a downtime. You can enable this option. And during that time, the email notification automatically queries all the user accounts, and if any particular client missed a scheduled backup, it automatically sends out a notification. Similarly, this can also be configured for the to address, CC, BCC, and the template too. So this is the missed template INI file that you can customize.
And that runs once a day.
Yeah, this runs once a day, and you can set the time for it to run on a daily basis.
Handles all the clients at the same time.
Yes. And the last one similarly is the over quota notification, and this also runs once a day at a particular time. So you can define a time for it to run, and it queries the storage for all the clients, and if any particular user has busted his quota, it automatically sends a notification to whatever address you define here. And again, it also has a template of its own where you can put your own text and customize the template.
This is one of those that you would also want to forward to the service provider as well, because often if you've got a service plan that calls for a specific quota, not to exceed quota, then somebody from the sales department at the RBS servers company might want to call up and say, hey, would you like to increase your plan, or would you like to delete some of these files?
Once you've set up all the notifications and configured, you click on save, and that's it. The notification is configured, and it automatically sends out a notification for whatever notifications you have enabled. So that's pretty much about the email notifications.
There is a question about the email notifications. Does the missed backup notification send out only to customers who had a scheduled backup that day?
Yes.
Okay. So what if they had a backup during the week? Well, yeah, that's fine. So if they had a backup once a week and they missed that backup, the next day they get an email, yeah?
Yeah. It runs every day, so the email notification, it knows which clients were scheduled to run in the last 24-hour period. So it knows which clients were scheduled to do a backup and which didn't, and it sends out an email only if a particular backup was missed by a particular client which was scheduled.
Okay. Our top-notch tech support guy, Pinku, wants us to tell him that where to find the email log and a few common error messages to look for.
Okay. The email logs are all saved in the application folder. So if you go back to the application folder, which is C program files RBS server, there are two kinds of log for the email notifications. One is the main log, which will record the error messages, is noted by RBE notify with the date and time on it. It creates a new log every day, and this is the log that gives you information if it encounters an error message saying it timed out or it couldn't reach the SMTP server, or for whatever reason. If you don't get an email, you can open this log file, and if there is an error message, you will see it in here. In most cases, the error message that would normally occur is if you don't have the valid SMTP server address defined correctly, or if you don't have the valid port number, or you fail to put a from address, a valid from address, or if your SMTP server requires authentication and you fail to provide it a username and password, then it would say authentication failed or something to that effect in this log file. So the error message for the email notification is recorded in this log file. There is another log file which is used internally by the program, but if you're curious, you can just open this log file, but I don't think you would need to know what is stored in here because it is used internally by the program. But if a technician, if you want help from a technician, it's better to provide both this log and the e-notify log for debugging purposes. But this is the main log which will have any errors, if any, recorded. And both the logs are created on a daily basis and are purged, I think, once every 10 days. So it holds, I think, the last 10 days worth of log files. Let's see. So those are the three plugins. We've looked at the registration wizard, we've looked at the online installer, and we had a look at the email notifications.
Yarley, any last minute questions about that stuff before we move on? We're going to talk about the EXE installer next. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead over there.
Okay.
And then we'll pick up if anybody types any questions about this. I'll bring them to your attention.
Okay. Once you've customized the registration wizard and you're now ready to build your installer, for the online installer, you just have to move the online installer file set to your web server. But if you want a CD-based installer...
excuse me for interrupting. Yeah. Move them out to the web server means usually FTPing them up there. So you'll need an FTP client. If your web server is hosted at a hosting center someplace, you can access it through FTP or through C-Console or through some kind of management utility where you can upload and download things. All you do is create a folder in one of your public folders called Online Installer, and then move all of these files into it. You upload them through FTP or you upload them through whatever web-based upload utility you get from your hosting service.
Right.
You have to do that every time you make modifications to this client software.
Yes. Every time you make any modifications to the customized client installer, or to the client visit configuration, you have to move your files to your online installer again. Now, to build a exe installer, you select Tools and Customize Client Installer. We've actually covered everything on customization in a previous webinar, but whatever changes you make in this Customize Client Installer, it automatically gets saved to your online installer file set too. So for example, let's say you change any of the information. Let's say you change an admin override password to something else, and if you click on apply and you say yes to continue, it'll automatically ask you, do you want to save your changes to the online installer as well? So if you say yes, then the catalog database and all the customization files are again copied over to the online installer. So whenever you make any changes and whenever you get prompted that do you want to save the changes to the online installer, then you have to move all your online installer file set again to your web server. Now to build a exe installer, once you've once you've set everything in the customized client installer and applied the changes, it's time to build an exe installer. The exe to build that, you select the create installer option, which will bring you to this form here. Now there are two options here. One is to copy to a folder, which will be your client CD based installer, or if you want to make an exe, a self-extracting single exe installer, you choose the select set of options in here, where you can set the name of the exe installer and the destination folder. I'm going to set it for desktop, and select make exe.
Adam, what's that digitally sign exe there?
If you have your code signing certificate to digitally sign your executable, you can select this option. So you need to purchase the certificate. I think VeriSign has one.
Yeah, several people sell them. The one that we recommend is a VeriSign Class 3 code signing certificate. And what that does is it ensures the target operating system, especially if it's Windows, that this exe file hasn't been modified since it left the trusted source. And in that case, the trusted source is your company. And so Vista, for example, will present a lot fewer errors and warning messages on installing an exe that's signed. It's much less scary. I've got another question here while I've got the mic. If you have if you've already customized your exe file, then you add the online installer plugin. Does it absorb the changes that you've made?
You have to go to the customized client installer and click on apply again.
Okay, and once you so you install the online installer plugin, then you go here and click apply.
And then it'll ask you.
Look at this, yeah.
And it'll copy all the customization files to your online installer. So that's how you do it. So once you give it a name for your exe installer, if you have a digitally, you have a code signing certificate, you can select this checkbox option, and it automatically signs the exe with your certificate. So you click on make exe, and it'll create an executable.
I see that it changed the name of the executable by adding setup to it.
That's for that was a change made for Vista. So it just adds the setup variable to the exe file name that you actually provide. So this is the exe installer that I just created. It is 22 MB in size. So you can now actually host this on your website, or you can put it on a CD, or whichever way you want to distribute this exe installer to your client is fine. Once they double click on this exe installer, it starts the installation process. So you want to go ahead and start test the registration?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't think we haven't had too many questions yet.
Okay. Since I've already configured the installer to use the registration wizard, I can show it to you on how it looks actually on the client when they install it.
So we're installing the client software now.
Okay. So when you click on new registration, this is when the registration wizard plugin comes into play. Okay, so this is the registration wizard. This is the same screens that you've looked on the server when you clicked on the test wizard option. This is the actual customization, everything that you've done with the registration wizard. This is the first introduction panel.
Now we recommend that you change those graphics on the left side.
Yeah, the graphics can be changed here as well. The graphics, for that you have to do it manually. I can show you where the panels are on the client. It's on the RBS server, and underneath the client folder, they are named panel 1, 0 to 6. They're all bitmap files. So if you want to edit or change the graphics, you can edit all these panels.
Please make sure that you keep them exactly the same size as far as number of pixels and exactly the same color count as they are right now. Now, Pinku also warns that us to not put anything else in that client folder that doesn't belong, like don't zip it up and then put a zip file in there, because when we make the exe installer, it's just going to grab whatever's in that client folder and roll it up into the exe file. So if you put something spare in there, it's going to bloat the size of the exe file.
That's right. Nothing should be saved in the RBS server folder or any folder underneath it. Make sure that if you want to save something, if you want to save your exe installer, save it in a different location. Don't create any customized files. I mean, nothing that should not be in here by default. So let's go through the registration process now. So they click on next, and they enter the details. Let's see.
You having trouble over there?
Yeah, your keyboard is different than mine.
Yeah, it's one of those split keyboards that is weirdly positioned there. Both sides of it kind of splits off.
Okay. So the user enters their own username and password, and you click on next to register with the server. And once it's registered successfully, they'll see the finish screen. And once they click on finish, it should load the client up and ask them for their encryption key. Now, if you look on the server, you can see on the monitor that the reg $user, the reg $user is the registrar login. So if you go to, which is the one that we enable at the very beginning. So this is the actual username and password that the registration wizard uses to log into the server.
Just leave that where it is.
I'm sorry?
Just leave that alone, right?
Yeah, just leave that alone. You don't actually have to change it. So you can see that the reg $user, which is the registrar, actually logged in, and it added a new user. So if you go to the account section now, and you'll see that the user is automatically created. And if you double click or right click and say edit user, you'll see all the information that I just entered.
Now the registration wizard plugin can be used both with the CD-based installer and with the online installer. It can also be used with the exe installer. Yes. When you install the plugin, it automatically adds itself to all of the installers that you have installed. Can we change the parameters for the passwords? Like you were able to enter one there, a username and password. You were able to enter GT. Is there any way at the current time that this version of our software will limit to 6 characters, for example, require a 6-character password?
No.
But in order to get around that, a lot of our service providers are using the registration wizard can be set to generate a username and password, which is always longer than 6 characters, or it can be set to use the email address, which I like best. I don't think it's not necessary for the user to know or remember his username and password. This will never be used again.
You can actually, if you want a predefined set of there is a different assignment method where you can set it to random, and you can set a prefix. For example, the prefix can be a reseller account or something like that. So it automatically appends the username with a prefix called account.
I see, yeah.
And the length can be varied too. So the random generated username can be 8 characters long or 6 characters long. I think the limit is 6 to 16 characters. So you can use that instead. Or you can use something called sequential, sequential is like the first user will be assigned a 1 and the second user will assign, there will be a sequential number that gets appended every time a user is created. So let's see. So that's so we've registered a user, and we have seen it work. And the same thing, if let's see, if the user goes through your online installer, it's still the same procedure. After the installation is complete, it still launches the registration wizard when they click on new registration, and it's the same procedure as the CD based or the EXE based installer, except you won't be shipping the EXE installer. They'll go to your website and download or install the software from there.
Now, is there a way, in rare cases, you might want to reinstall and bypass the registration wizard? Is there a way to do that?
There is actually. You mean after installing the client?
Suppose you've installed it once and used the registration wizard.
Mm-hmm.
Then you might want to do a disaster recovery, or in a rare case, you might have some reason to install it again without creating a new account.
If you want to reinstall an existing client, you always have to pick disaster recovery. But if you want to bypass the registration wizard for some reason, let's see, you can actually remove a file. Let's see. Okay. In the remote backup, which is the client installer file set.
Or whatever you've named it. If you customize the software, it'll be a different name.
Yeah, if you don't want to bring up the registration wizard, you can actually delete this regwizard.exe file, and it'll bring up the default registration screen where you enter the manual username and password.
It's a rare case that you'd have to do this, but somebody did ask.
Okay, so you can rename the regwizard.exe, and it won't launch the registration wizard. Instead, it'll give you the default screen for the registration. Now there is an advanced customization where you can change the labels on the registration screen itself. So let's go back to the RBS server folder and go to the client folder. And in here you'll see an INI file called rblabel.ini. Now these are the labels that appears in the second screen where you enter where the user enters the name, the company, the address, information, and all that. Let's say you don't require the fax, and instead you want date of birth, for example. So you can accordingly change the label in this file and save it, and then build your installer, and instead of fax, it will present them the date of birth field where they can enter the date of birth. So similarly, other fields can be customized, and this is only applicable for the second screen, which is I'll show you in a second, which is the user information panel, which is this one right here. So all the labels in here are read from this INI file, so you can customize it. If you don't require any information, or you want something else other than email or country, you can change it. So that's one way to customize this panel and get more additional information. Let's see.
Well, we've got about 7 minutes left in today's webinar, so if you have any last-minute questions, now would be a good time. Well, there we go. Now would be a good time to ask them. Marcus wants to know if we can use less than 10 fields. Can we just remove a field?
You can't remove a field. You can only rename an existing field.
Okay. Let's see. Is there a log file for the registration wizard?
There is. The log file is on the client folder, which is the client's application folder, and it's called RBregviz.log.
So this is on the client side, not
on
the
the
server.
client side. Yeah, it's on the client side. On the server, the registration information is in the default log for the server, which is the server's audit log, which you can get to from view logs, RBS audit log. And this is where you see that the reg user logged in, and it created a user called GT. So this is where the server side logging is written to, which is a standard log for the server. On the client side, it's named RBregviz.log. So in case your registration fails on the client side, which it shouldn't if you have configured everything correctly on the server side, you can take a look at the log inside the application folder, and it's named RBregviz.log. Let's see, is there anything else in the customization? I think
No.
that's about it.
No, that's a great coverage. Good. Okay. Well, that's about the end of the webinar for today. So I want to thank everybody for attending and hope that we held your attention. I see from our screen that we did. First time we've ever held 100% attention all the way through. That's great. And remember, if you didn't get your question answered, please submit it by email to sales@remote-backup.com. While you're sending questions by email, please tell us what you'd like to see in future webinars. We are right now planning the next 4 sessions of webinars. It would be a good time for you to send in your suggestions about that. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted tomorrow or maybe tonight at our website at remote-backup.com so you can review it. We're also going to start posting these webinars and some of our tutorial movies on YouTube. So check us out over there. Username is Remote Backup. Feel free to phone us at any time. Anyone at RBS will be happy to help. Our toll-free number is 800-945-4491, and our direct line is 901-850-9920. I'm Rob Cosgrove, and that's Gautam Tiruvanallur. Thanks for attending.
Thanks, guys. Bye.